Melanie Jasper says her son Cooper was born with a smile on his face. The dimple never left his cheek. He won the hearts of every person he came in contact with. His mother, his father, his 3 older sisters, his grandparents, his teachers. He loved to laugh. He loved life itself. And JJ, his dad, confessed partiality, saying Cooper was practically a perfect child. And he was born to practically a perfect family. Farm-dwelling, fun-loving, God-seeking, Christ-hungry, everything you could ask for. JJ and Melanie really poured their hearts into their children, and JJ in particular was hooked in to the life of the only son that God had given him. They were riding in a dune buggy on July 17th, 2009. They had done this so many times, zipping down a dirt road in a roll cage cart. In fact, the experience itself was not new, but the flip was. On a completely level road, Cooper safely buckled in. JJ made a quick turn, and for some unknown reason, it flipped over. Cooper was unresponsive. JJ called 911, and then Melanie and said, "There's been a major accident. I don't think our son's going to make it." The next hours were every person's nightmare, especially every parent's nightmare. Ambulance, ERs, sobs, shock, and then the news. Cooper had passed from this life to heaven. JJ and Melanie found themselves doing what no parent should have to do. Find a casket, prepare a funeral for their only son. In the coming days, they said they kind of slipped into what they called a mind-numbing rhythm. Every morning they would awake holding each other in their arms and crying, and they would soldier bravely throughout the day, only to fall into bed at night weeping again. JJ said, "There is no class, there is no book on this planet that could prepare you for the experience of having your 5-year-old son die in your arms. We know what the bottom looks like." Sometimes we discover what the top looks like. We summit a peak, maybe at a wedding, a promotion, the birth of a child, and everything seems to be nifty and wonderful. And then, at some undetermined point in time, every one of us will discover what that bottom looks like. When the dune buggy flips, when the doctor's test reports come back positive, when the child that you have loved and reared and raised runs away from you. King David knew what the bottom looked like. He discovered it quickly in Psalm 3. For he too had a son. His name was not Cooper, his name was Absalom. Oh, Absalom, voted most likely to succeed by his senior class. The Bible said he had to cut his hair every year because it weighed so much, it pulled his neck down. The best looking boy in the entire nation, Absalom. He had everything going for him, but for some strange reason, he completely turned on his daddy, became an embittered rebel, a mutinous monster, taking seemingly half of the nation and ripping it apart, becoming guilty of treason, kicking his dad out of the kingdom, booting him out of the capital. And so the one who ruled Israel is on the run from, of all people, his own son. Absalom surrounded himself with a group of corrupt creeps and conscripted a makeshift army and created a civil war in a nation that had known only peace and prosperity during all the days of his dad's reign. And so in Psalm 3, David is enduring a double loss. Loss of a kingdom, loss of a son. Chuck Swindoll writes, "Of all life's pressures, none is harder to bear than trouble at home." Financial pressure is tough, not impossible to work out. Physical pain can be bad, sometimes horrible, but usually not without hope. The loss of a job, the failure at school could bring to the surface feelings of desperation, but most of them will pass. But there's nothing to compare with the lingering, agonizing, torturous headache brought on by a rebellious, wayward child. And how many of us today know what that's like firsthand? Too big to spank, too angry to reason with, too volatile to threaten, too stubborn to warn, bound and determined to do whatever they want to do. And Chuck writes, if you've been there, no one needs to elaborate. The broken-hearted mom and dad need a comforter, not a commentator. It's agony at its deepest valley. Prayer becomes a lonely vigil, at times empty, hopeless repetition of sounds struggling out of a swollen face, confused and endless questions like, how did it start? I thought we raised them right. Where did it all go wrong? Will we ever be connected and close together again? In David's case, the answer is no. Never again, David. Yes, your reign will be reestablished, but your relationship with your son is gone forever. Forever. You know the story in 2 Samuel 18 of how he died. A rebel's death, hanging from a tree with spears stuck in his side. David wasn't shocked by any of this news. He knew exactly how things were going to flesh out. See, David's recoiling from sins of yesteryear, his crimes with Bathsheba and Uriah. And when Nathan the prophet warned him in 2 Samuel chapter 12, 9-12, David, you will experience the death of not one or two, but 4 of your own sons, and you will watch to see the complete disarray of your kingdom. So I guess in the words of Galatians 6:8, David is sown to the flesh, and like all of us, he reaped corruption. And yet when you read through Psalm 3, your heart just goes out to him. And guess what? So does God's. And that's the good news that I have to offer you today. When people and predicaments turn against you, and they will, God turns towards you. Isn't that good? They'll turn against you, God turns towards you. Now, you could be traveling through a fairly deep valley this morning, physically, financially, emotionally. You retrace your steps, you rethink your past, and you conclude in your mind, wait a second, I haven't done anything to deserve this. Or, I guess I'm experiencing the fruit of my own foolish activity. But either way, this is the good news of Psalm 3. Either way, if you've confessed your sin and your part that you played in the problem, like David did in 2 Samuel 12, God forgives the sin. God refreshes your life. God restores you. But here's the principle that's worth jotting down. God may not remove your pain, but He will restore your peace. Say that with me. God may not remove your pain, but He will restore your peace. And that's the promise of the 3rd Psalm. He'll be present with you. He will protect you in the midst of the mind-numbing misery and the depth of the valley that you're experiencing in your life today. He did it for David. He ended up doing it for JJ and Melanie, and He will do it for you. Now, as we step into the psalm, we start off with David's distress. Look at verses 1-2. O Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Many are rising up against me. Many are saying of my soul, There is no deliverance for him in God. Now you'll notice to the right there's a little Hebrew word, Selah. It pops up 3 times in this psalm, 71 times in the book of Psalms. Scholars are unsure as to its meaning. Number 1, it could mean pause, ponder these thoughts. Number 2, it could mean lift up. A musical note as in a crescendo for the trumpets to blare and the voices to sing. But either way, pause or lift up, it does mean stop, pay attention, what's being said is important. Now the inscription reads a morning prayer, which tells me that the fiasco of the night before is still fresh on David's mind. You know what that's like, don't you? You have a disaster in the night and you wake up in the morning as if you were drunk. What happened last night? Is that reality? Did that occur to my life? I've had that happen more times than I could count. I want to go back to bed and rewind. That's what David wants to do. He wants to rewind the tape. He's thinking about what happened the night before when he was booted out of the kingdom and he was forced to run. You know, David's used to running, isn't he? 30 years before, he ran for 14 long years. The original marathon runner. I mean, running forever from King Saul. Would he ever guess he'd be running from his own son? But indeed he was. And what's worst of all, what's worse than even his son's mistreatment, is the deliberate betrayal of his own people. You know, every king after David in Israel's history, even after the nation split in the northern and southern kingdom, every single king you could read in the book of Kings and Chronicles was judged on the basis of how he measured up to David. Jesus is called the son of David. Best king. No one loved their people more than David. No king was more loved than David. But at this time in his life, everyone turned on David. And there is nothing, take it from one who's been there, and you have been as well, there's nothing worse than betrayal when you've trusted someone. One lady writes, for 22 years I built the business. I married a man and brought him in. I became vice president, made him president. A few years later, we got involved in divorce litigation. He brought in a sharp attorney. He transferred all of our assets and liabilities into a brand new corporation. And suddenly, I am out of the corporation, which I founded and built. I had nothing to show for over 30 years of labor. That's David. Over 30 years of labor, kicked out of the capital, kicked out of his country, forced to run from his son and the folks he had ministered to for 3 decades. And it was bad. And you can see in the verses that we read, first of all, letter A, that is, his foes were numerous. His foes were numerous. Look at verses 1 to 2 again. Lord, how my adversaries have, underlined it, increased. The word, many are rising up against me. Again, many saying of my soul. If you think that David's just in an emotional state and is exaggerating the truth, I want you to read the many in 2 verses of Scripture. Read aloud with me. Here we go. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor from the city Golah, while he was offering the sacrifices. It's interesting when we came to Ahithophel that you became very quiet. I understand that. Okay, here we go. Just follow me. And the conspiracy was strong, and the people increased continually with Absalom. How many people? Here's the answer. Furthermore, Ahithophel said to Absalom, please let me choose 12,000 men, that I may arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he's weary and exhausted and terrify him, so that all the people who are with him will flee. Then I will strike down the king alone. I would say that 12,000 men constitutes many. Amen? That's worth being concerned about. That's worth being stressed about. That's worth talking to God about. So his foes were numerous. And secondly, on your outline, his foes were nasty. Why were they nasty? Because they said the worst thing possible to David in verse 2. And what is that? There's no deliverance for him from God. Ooh, you want to twist the knife in David. Say anything about his looks, anything about his character, but don't say anything about his relationship with God. Some years ago, a person who used to attend our church began attacking my relationship with God and telling me I don't preach the Word of God. And I have to tell you, I did not respond the way I should have. This guy was 6'2", and he was Mr. Muscle Bound. And I said, my friend, I invite you to come to my house right now, and I will beat the living daylights out of you on the front lawn with my own fists. You may end up killing me in the process, but when you tell me I don't preach the Word of God, them is fighting words. And these were fighting words for David. You know, we all have buttons, don't we? Now you know my buttons, so don't go there on that one. Tell me I'm not a good surfer, I could deal with that. Don't tell me this, that I don't preach the Word of God. Don't tell David he's not connected with God. Don't do that. No one in all of Israel had a heart for God like David. He wrote the Psalms. Hello. This man was the man called the man after God's own heart. And it was a nasty statement to make. Hey, David, you've been talking to God, the wonderful one. Don't waste your time. He doesn't hear you anymore, David. He's on our team now. How do I know that broke David's heart? Because he included it in the Psalms. That's how I know. You recall the rhyme of yesteryear, especially if you're my age. You grew up with it. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will often wound you. A psychotherapist named Dr. Richard Gardner, who works with children and teens, reports receiving this letter from a young boy who's 7. Dear Dr. Gardner, what's bothering me is that long ago, some big person, it was a boy about 13, he called me a turtle, and I know he said that because of my plastic surgery. I think God hates me because of my face. And when I die, he will probably send me to hell. That might be a good letter for you and I to remember the next time we choose to be vicious with our vocabulary. We have no idea how deeply our words hurt the hearts of others, do we? How they could wound the souls of God's saints. These words pushed David into a pit of despair, depression, and despondency. David was having, one of those days. Ever have one of those days? How many? Yes. We went about a month ago to watch, I think it was the movie God Is Not Dead with the congregation. And I was interested to see in the previews an upcoming film that will be shown perhaps in the next months based on the fine children's book of yesteryear with a terrific title, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. 7-year-old awakes in the morning, and here's what he says. I went to sleep with gum in my mouth. Now there's gum in my hair. When I got out of bed this morning, I tripped on the skateboard, and by mistake, I dropped my sweater in the sink while the water was running. And I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And after a terrible day at school, and a horrible visit to the dentist, and a no-good stop at the shoe store, he slumps into his chair at dinner time, and he says, and I would say this too, there were lima beans for dinner, and I hate limas. But I wouldn't say this. There was kissing on TV, and I hate kissing. I got soap in my eyes when my bath was too hot. My marble went down the drain. I had to wear my railroad train pajamas. I hate my railroad train pajamas. When I went to bed, Nick took back the pillow he said I could keep, and the Mickey Mouse nightlight burned out, and I bit my tongue. The cat wants to sleep with Anthony, not with me. It's been a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And after that terrible day, you know what he says? I think I'll move to Australia. I'll tell you something. This viceroy would have loved to vacate to the land down under. But he couldn't go there. He felt like we all do at times. A dismal failure. Can I share with you what to do when you are at the lowest level and your life represents the capital L for loser? Do what David did. Talk to God about it. We tend to think that we need to pray for others, and I have to admit, I'd say 95% of my prayers are for the congregation. We have enough people in this congregation. I'm tired of praying when I don't want to pray for myself. I'm done praying when I've prayed for so many people. Maybe you're like that too. There's always so many needs. But there are times you need to pray for yourself. There are times when you need to get alone with God and just give it up. That's what the Psalms teaches us. Just tell him exactly how you're feeling. Lord, I'm overwhelmed. Your people have turned against me. They've manufactured the lie of all lies that our hearts are not connected anymore. Absalom spread that lie. British statesman John Callahan wrote, a lie could be halfway around the world before the truth gets its boots on. That's what happens in a church. I've seen it happen in this church. I've seen it happen recently in this church. People lying about the character of another person. But it doesn't make any difference when the truth comes out because they already believe the lie. That's the way it was with David. The lie was believed. And so he's just moaning and he's maybe complaining and he's crying out to God. That's who to go to. You say, I'm going to my spouse and my husband and wife, they're tired of hearing it. They could be tired of hearing it. And your children, they're going to run outside. They don't want to hear it. And your friends will say, look at the time, how fast it's gone. And they'll walk away from you. God never does that. Oh, that's what I love about the Lord. It's one of the prime examples of a great God. He never gets weary of the hurts that break my heart. In fact, he calls me to tell him those hurts. One of my all-time favorite verses, that's 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7. Casting all your care on him because he cares for you. The key word is not casting or he or cares. It is because. Because. God could have chosen the Greek word hina, which is in the construction a conditional term which could be translated casting all your care on him because when you're loyal and lovable and you're a good guy or a good gal, he cares for you. That's what hina would have been in the Greek. But instead he uses the word hati, which is unconditional. Oh, I love that. Cast all your care on him because he loves you when you're a loser. He loves you when you're a louse. He loves you when you're disobedient. He loves you when you have deserted him. He loves you when it's your sin that caused the stress and struggle of your life. Maybe your spouse doesn't love you too much at that point, or your friends or others around you. Good news, God does. God does. And if we were to be painfully honest today, and it may be tough for some of you to accept this, but it's probably true. If we were to be painfully honest, if we were to look in the mirror and ask the Holy Spirit, mirror, mirror on the wall, Holy Spirit, tell me all, whatever. I think that he would say this. Most of the crisis and stress you're enduring right now, you have caused. You have caused. God would agree with the TV personality of yesteryear, Jack Parr. He said, if I could kick right in the seat of the pants, the one who causes the most pain in life, I wouldn't be able to sit down for a week. Yeah. But you know, even though we create the crisis, even though David knew, I'm the cause for the ill wind whipping through my life, I have a God who cares for me in that wind. He cares for me in the chaos, and he always offers me a way back to hope. I read this past week that farmers in the Midwest will at times run a rope from their house to the barn at the first sight of a blizzard, because they know the stories of people who have died in their front yard during a whiteout because they couldn't find the house. Now, child of God, I guarantee you're going to get caught in a whiteout. You're going to get blasted by a blizzard. You won't be able to see your way out. Reach for the rope. Say, what's the rope? Orange Coast Community Church, whom Christ died for. Your fellowship and your connection here is more important than your connection with your own family at home and the job that you work at. You need this. This is your breathing apparatus for life. The rope is the time spent in the Word every single day. The rope is the prayers that you offer to your Father in heaven for hope. And sometimes you don't want to pray, and sometimes you don't want to worship, and sometimes you don't want to show up to church. Just drag your tired old bones anyway and do it. Grab the rope. David grabbed the rope, and he found hope. David's difficulty moves to David's defense. Verse 3. This is the song we sang today. Remember we told you that every one of the Psalms were put to song? Here's one of them. And what is it? You, O Lord, thou, O Lord, are a shield about me. You're my glory and the lifter of my head. Now, when the critics attacked David, they used the word God. See that in verse 2? That's Elohim. That's the all-powerful creator. David said, I'm not looking at him as the distant one. I'm calling him Lord Yahweh, which is the personal connector to me. The one who hears my hurt, the one who was present in all of my needs. The one who says, David, you're precious to me. You're valuable. And David, I will be an impregnable shield that surrounds you. Only one of several metaphors that God uses in His Word to describe the way He protects us. Other words, He uses the word rock. We saw that in chapter 7 of Matthew, didn't we? Make sure you're on the rock. God's also your tower. God's your wall of fire. God's your city of refuge. Choose the metaphor you like best and use it when you're struggling. God is there for you. Verse 4. I was crying to the Lord with my voice. He answered me from His holy mountain. Historical context of that verse is 2 Samuel 15:30. David's walking up the Mount of Olives, brokenhearted over what's taking place in his kingdom. This is right before he's kicked out of the kingdom. He sees it coming down, and his robe is torn in anguish, probably ashes on his head. His head is uncovered. He no longer has his crown. He says, I've lost my crown. I've lost my glory. I've lost my strength. I've lost everything. And yet he realizes God has been my glory. God has lifted my head. God has given me His strength. I talked with a brother just recently in counseling who's going through a disastrous, difficult time in his life. A time that would cause some Christians to walk away from the church and walk away from God but he said, Pastor, I'm going to count on me. I will be committed to Orange Coast. I will be committed to God. No matter how this event turns out, I will draw closer to Christ, not further as a result of what I'm experiencing. That's what David did. That's what David did. Through an unfortunate chain of events, you could wake up and it could happen so quick. You lose your home. Your spouse says, I'm filing for divorce. Your boss says, we don't need you anymore. And you're going, what? Is this a nightmare? Believe me, it could happen that fast. But David says, and God says, if you take the hurt and somehow learn to release it to the one who loves you, then he will fill you with his glory. But you have to come to him empty, not full. One by one, he took them from me. All the things I valued most. Till my life was empty and every glittering toy was lost. And I walked earth's highways grieving in my rags and poverty, till I heard his voice inviting, lift those empty hands to me. So I stretched my hands toward heaven, and he filled them with the store of his own transcendent riches, till my hands could take no more. And then I comprehended, with my stupid mind and dull, God cannot pour his riches into hands already full. I have to come to him empty. And then there's mercy and goodness. And David begins to experience that in the next two verses. I lay down and I slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustains me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me round about. David says, in retrospect, I had a pretty decent sleep last night. No Somanex needed. I just went right out. And when I got up, oddly enough, no one laid a hand on me. In fact, no one's ever laid a hand on me. David remembers when he was 17, standing in the valley of Elah, facing that giant from Gath named Goliath. David took him down. He remembers the 14 years in which Saul and his army chased David in the wilderness. Nobody laid a hand or a spear on David. He recalls all the great battles in which he fought. No scars, no hurt, no pain. So he says, I don't care. Let him come. Bring 10,000 times 10,000 because God is on my side. Hey, what's David doing right here? He's doing what you and I need to do when we're overwhelmed by distress. He's taking a mental vacation and a brief reprieve from his pressure. He's kind of refreshing himself that God's been good to me. I need to do that at times. You do as well. We need to relax and release the pressure. And just remember all the list of things that God in his love has given us. And then we need to revel in the fact, like David, I am a child of God. Say that with me. I am a child of God. So if you're a child of God, start acting like a child again. Because Jesus said, unless you become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of God. I like the way Max Lucado puts it. Couldn't we learn to be children again? Bring out the marbles. So what if the shoes get scuffed? Bring out the bat and glove. So what if your muscles ache? Bring out the taffy. So what if it gets stuck to your teeth? Bring out the surfboard. So what if you get wiped out by the waves? I added that one. He's from Texas. He doesn't understand. Be a child again. Flirt. Go kiss some lips. Make sure you kiss the right lips, I add. You have some rocks to skip, some people to hug. Someone has to laugh at Bugs Bunny and the Three Stooges. Might as well be you. Someday you're going to retire. Why not now? Don't retire from your job, but retire from your attitude. Has complaining ever made the day better? Has grumbling ever paid the bills? Has worrying about tomorrow ever changed it? And then I like this line. This is a good one. I love this one. Let someone else run the world for a while. I know people right now in my life who are trying to run their world and everyone else's world, and it's driving me crazy just to watch them run it because they're acting like they're little gods. And sometimes we have to run everyone's life and everyone's situation. Now listen, David's job is to run the world of Israel. That's what he's called to do, and he's taking a vacation from his job. He's not in control of everything. I'm taking a break. I'm thanking God. I'm relaxing. I'm reveling in his care for me. David's smart to do that. And so David's defense quickly leads in the last two verses to David's deliverance. David's deliverance. Verse 7. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. So he employs both Lord, Yahweh, and God. He'll pull an Elohim now. You've smitten all my enemies on the cheek. You have shattered the teeth of the wicked. What's David saying? Go get him, God. Go get him. Nail him. You ever had that feeling inside? It's okay to do, you know. I guess you double it up. Jesus says, he says, be kind to your enemy, right? But he doesn't say you can't pray an imprecatory psalm against your enemy. Now, I don't know how that balances out, but both are true. So you treat me like a jerk and I'm nice to you, and I say, God bless you. Lord, get him. Get him. You could do both. You could do both. Jesus said, pray for your enemies. He didn't say what to pray for your enemies. Okay. It's biblical. David's praying this way. Go get him, Lord. We've all had that at times, haven't we? The vindictive spirit. Lady offered in the one ads for sale a brand new Porsche. Price, $200. First person called, said, what's the gimmick? She said, no gimmick. My husband died, specified in his will that his car be sold and the money be given to his secretary. See, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's that vindictive spirit. I'm going to get her back. Now, David's not demonstrating a vindictive spirit so much. He's allowing God's retribution to step in. He's recalling the past when God has smitten the cheek and shattered the teeth and knocked the enemies down. And guess what? God's going to do it again. God answered David's prayer. David wept when God answered his prayer in 2 Samuel 18, but he answered his prayer big time. As you know, Absalom is galloping, and he gets his neck caught in a tree branch. He's hanging and swinging, and then Joab says, he looks like a nice target, and shoots him right through. And David's prayer is answered. Even though he didn't want it answered in that way, it was. God answered this prayer in Psalm 3. And David, after all this emotional vamping, reaches this climactic conclusion in verse 8. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessings upon your people. Wow. Blessings, in the Hebrew means what? Happiness. Your happiness upon your people. So David's now happy. He's no longer sad. He's upbeat. And so this is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see this more in the Psalms. If you take your sadness and you take your sickness, and we'll talk about this next week, and you jam it down and you don't talk about it, then you're always going to be sad and you're always going to be sick. If you get it out, you can get rid of it. And God will make you happy. And then he starts the verse with a great statement. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Guess who liked that statement? A guy named Jonah. Jonah used those exact same words in Jonah chapter 2, about verse 9, when he's sloshing around in the belly of the big fish. And then the fish hears, salvation belongs to the Lord, and the Rhinodontompus, whoop, spits him out the beach. And Jonah lived to preach again. And David lived to reign again, and you will live to smile again. Because happiness is upon your people. So he closes the psalm with great reassurance. You know why he didn't fear his enemies? Because he's convinced emotionally of his Father's presence. So I guess the solution to life is not to get rid of problems. It's to sense God's presence. That's what we need to be praying for. Quite often, we pray for others, Lord, take their problems away. I'm going to ask us as a congregation to step up to a new level of prayer and to say, Lord, when we pray for a person, I'm not going to pray that their problems be lifted just yet. I'm going to pray, first of all, that your presence be felt. Because then you can be lifted up even when things are dragging you down. But you got to get in your soul a sense of the Father's presence in your life. You've got to know that Daddy's there. Little boy on occasion had a tendency during a storm to run into his daddy's bed in the bleak and darkness of the night, and he would leap under the covers. And it was so dark he couldn't see his father, but he would ask the question, is your face turned towards me, Daddy? And the father in the darkness would say, yes, my son. My face is turned toward you. And only then would his boy surrender to sleep. My all-time favorite preacher of yesteryear, Scottish preacher of the 1800s, was Alexander MacLaren. When Alexander was a young boy, actually in his teens, he took a job working in Glasgow, which was many miles from his hometown. And he'd work there throughout the week, and then he would walk back on Saturday nights so he could be there in church for Sunday. The problem was, between Glasgow and his hometown was a deep, dark ravine. And superstition said it was filled with demons and evil spirits. It was the Amityville horror of its day. And all week long, this 16-year-old kid was terrified at work, thinking what I'm scared most of all is to walk through that ravine in the middle of the night. Friday came and his heart's pounding. He worked Saturday and now it's time to go home. There was nothing to do but muster up the courage and to take those steps. He starts walking towards the ravine. He gets right next to that deep valley and he stops. His heart's pounding, his hands shaking, his feet are like lead. And then, in the darkness of the night, the voice, Alex, it's your dad. I've come to walk with ye through the ravine. Let's bow together. He will walk with you through your ravine. Reach for the rope, child of God. Find the hope that He has to offer you today. His promise, Hebrews 13:5, I will never abandon you or forsake you. Never. It's possible you're thinking, I'm not sure He's my father. I'm not sure I'm in His family. You can be sure. In the next few moments before you leave, you could have eternal security, a one-way ticket to heaven, a change of life, an infusion of joy, and best of all, forgiveness for all sins. If you enter His family by faith. All it takes is recognizing that someone did it in your place. He walked through the darkest and deepest ravine. His name was Jesus, and the ravine was Golgotha. There he died for you, so he could take you by the hand when times get dark and bring you into light. Do you know him today? If you don't know him personally, this is the moment to change that. And so, I'd like to ask you, while no one's looking around, to just slip your hand up good and high. In doing so, you're saying, Pastor, I am giving my life to the one who walks with me through the ravine today. I want to become a Christian and to enter the Father's family by faith. Is that your desire? If so, I will pray with you this morning. Just lift your hand good and high so I'll know who you are. God bless you, brother, for your commitment. Thank you. Thank you. We thank you, Lord, that when life is tough, and sometimes it is, and it's unexplainably confusing, that there's a way out, and the way is you. You told your men hours before you were executed, I am the way. So, Father, help us to cling to the rope of hope and to offer that to people in our lives who are struggling through tough times this week. We pray in the precious name of the shepherd of our soul. For his sake we ask it. Amen.